Hello everyone, this is Debargo Ganguly and let's continue from where we left in Act 1, Scene 3 of Macbeth. So Angus and Ross have entered, and Ross says, "The king hath happily received, Macbeth, the news of thy success, and when he reads thy personal venture in the rebels' fight, his wonders and his praises do contend, which should be thine, or his silenced with that. In viewing over the rest of the selfsame day, he finds thee in the stout Norwegian ranks, nothing afeard of what thyself didst make, strange images of death, as thick as hail came post with post, and every one did bear thy praises in his kingdom's great defence, and poured them down before him." So you see, Ross has a way of speaking, and he says that he has come as a messenger, and he's summarizing that what valiant acts Macbeth has done. And so he says that basically the king is silenced and wonders that uh, such whether such valiant acts that Macbeth has done for his country should be praised in Macbeth's name or in the country's name or in the king's name. And therefore, when everybody is praising Macbeth, the king also does not fall short of it, and therefore he has sent his messengers. And Angus says, "We are sent to give thee from our royal master thanks, only to herald thee into his sight, not pay thee." So Angus, while Ross is very talkative, Angus is very to the point. So he says that we are simply here to call you forth to meet his majesty and nothing else. Ross, and for an earnest great honour, he bade me from him call the Thane of Cawdor, in which addition hail most worthy Thane, for it is thine. So finally the witch's prophecy is taking place. What, can the devil speak true? So it strikes Banquo. So can the devil speak true? The Thane of Cawdor lives. Why do you dress me in borrowed robes? So Macbeth kind of plays a little dumb here, deliberately plays a little dumb here. He says, "But the previous Thane of Cawdor lives, so why do you dress me in borrowed robes?" This is the first of a series of clothing imagery in Macbeth, where Macbeth says that, "Why do you dress me in his robe?" So Angus now justifies, "Who was the Thane? Lives yet, but under heavy judgment bears that life which he deserves to lose, whether he was combined with those of Norway, or did line the rebel with hidden help and vantage, or that with both he laboured in his country's wrack, I know not, but treason's capital confessed and proved have overthrown him." So he is basically overthrown for either conspiring or actually directly helping the Norwegian king. And Macbeth says in an aside. An aside is a very interesting Elizabethan dramatic uh, feature, which is, suppose there are 3-4 characters on the stage, and suddenly a character comes apart from them and talks, and it is believed that the other characters cannot hear him, but the audience can hear him. So it's a way of talking to yourself among a group of people. You are talking to yourself and you are talking to the invisible audience, but nobody else can hear you. So Macbeth says, "Glums and Thane of Cawdor, the greatest is behind." So look, already he is anticipating that he shall become king, since one of the prophecies has come true. And to Angus and Ross, "Thanks for your pains." Then to Banquo, look, he says, "Do you not hope your children shall be kings, when those that gave the Thane of Cawdor to me promised no less to them?" So look, Macbeth is already concerned with Banquo's children becoming king, because he knows that after he shall become king, Banquo's children shall become king. So this is very interesting that the political dimension of the text has started to take shape. And Banquo knows Macbeth very well. So he says, "That trusted home Might it enkindle you unto the crown, besides the Thane of Cawdor. But 'tis strange, and oftentimes to win us to our harm, the instruments of darkness tell us truths, win us with honest trifles, to betray us in deepest consequence. So Banco says that alright, they have enkindled an unbridled flame in you, which might lead you to get the throne for yourself. But what I am concerned with the fact that how do we arrive at the truth? They have told us certain truths, but you see, each truth has a way of its arrival. So whether they have told us truths only to bring destruction to us or to do us any good, I am not certain about that. Cousins aboard, I pray you. And look, Macbeth goes into another aside. Two truths are told as happy prologues to the swelling act of the imperial theme. So the theme of the play is kingship, the imperial theme. So Macbeth is Thane of Glums, Macbeth is Thane of Cawdor, and he says, "I thank you, gentlemen," and suddenly goes back into another aside. This supernatural soliciting cannot be ill, cannot be good. Here, Macbeth has already started to kind of deceive himself, because the witches did not solicit, they simply gave a few statements, and the witches never told Macbeth how he can become the king. Macbeth has earned the title of the Thane of Cawdor. Similarly, he can earn the kingship, but Macbeth chooses to think about the murder of Duncan, because he takes the witch's prophecy as a supernatural soliciting. The witches never solicited to Macbeth. Cannot be ill, cannot be good. If ill, why had it given me earnest of success commencing in a truth? I am Thane of Cawdor. If good, why do I yield to that suggestion, whose horrid image doth unfix my hair and make my seated heart knock at my ribs against the use of nature? So look, he says that if it's bad, then why has it yielded any success to me? I am the Thane of Cawdor at the end of the day. But if it's good, then why do I think about murdering Duncan? Why do I have certain thoughts? Why do I have such kinds of thoughts that it makes my heart palpitate, that is, beat against the rib cage, which is not natural, so against nature's use? Present fears are less than horrible imaginings. So the present fears, that is the fears that Macbeth has right now, are less intense than the imagination which is so horrible for Macbeth. And you will see that Macbeth's tragedy is intensified. I do not know whether it's a tragedy of imagination, as some critics have called it. However, what I think is that at least his imagination adds to his own problems. His imagination creates more problems for him. It intensifies his tragedy, the horror of his tragedy. My thought, whose murder, and look, Macbeth can never say murder properly. He says murder, so he tones it down. My thought, whose murder yet is but fantastical, shakes so my single state of man, that function is smothered in surmise, and nothing is but what is not. So look, his murderous thought, which is fictional, fantastical yet, imaginary yet, it is shaking his single state of man. Now, what is single state of man? Now, Stevens has suggested that, according to ancient beliefs, single state suggested weakness and double state suggested strength. Alright, we have many such references in Shakespeare's other plays, but also what happens is that Grierson suggests that single here means indivisible. That is the whole composite nature of body, spirit, made by one soul, and so on and so forth. So the single state of man, that is the single wholesomeness of his self, that is shaken to the core. That function is smothered in surmise. As he is imagining so many things that he cannot perform his imaginations. And nothing is but what is not. So, nothing is but what is not suggests that it can be interpreted in many ways, but nothing is but what is not can be seen as one of Macbeth's guilty confessions. So that is, he says that on the one hand, without kingship he has nothing. So he considers kingship to be his ultimate goal. So without that ultimate goal, whatever there is, that is absolutely worth nothing. So nothing is but what is not, that is kingship, which is yet to be here, which is yet to arrive. So nothing is but what is not, that is his life is incomplete without the kingship. On the other hand, we can interpret this in another way, in a psychological way, that is nothing is. So his entire state of mind is like a nothing, is like a void, which is tormented by his imagination of what is not in reality. He says a little while ago that present fears are less than horrible imaginings, right? So similarly, nothing is, that is his present fears, the nothing that he is, but what is not, that is his imagination. And Banquo says, look how our partners rapped. So he repeats himself. And in an aside, Macbeth says, if chance will have me king, why chance may crown me without my stir? So if fate decides that I am to be the king, fate will decide so without me doing anything. So he goes into the entire matrix of predestination and free will. But let's not ponder on this too much. And Banquo says, new honors come upon him, like our strange garments, cleave not to their mold, but with the aid of use. So in the Elizabethan age, they did not have the pantaloons and so on and so forth, where you could alter your clothes. So they used to have a set of clothes, and then they used to get used to it while wearing it. So since he is clothed in new, he's donned in new clothes, so he's getting used to that. That is what Banquo says. So look, he echoes Macbeth's clothing imagery used a little while earlier. And Macbeth says, come what come may, time and hour runs through the roughest day. So no matter what may come, Macbeth says that the passage of time shall keep on running through the roughest day. That is, no matter how much problematic the situation gets, we shall see what happens. So look, Macbeth for the time being is to a certain extent not committed. He is on the one hand tormented by his imaginations, and on the other hand he tries to stay non-committal to the murder. But this undecided state will not remain for too long. And Banquo says, worthy Macbeth, we stay upon your leisure, so we are waiting for you. And Macbeth says, give me your favour, my dull brain was wrought with things forgotten. So the plot of murdering. Kind gentlemen, your pains are registered, where every day I turn the leaf to read them. Let us toward the king. So let us go toward the king. But this is also a veiled comment, because you see, there is an instance of the royal plural. The kings and queens often refer to themselves in plural, not in singular. So let us toward the king can also be interpreted like Macbeth's assertion of let me towards kingship. So let us toward kingship. Think upon what chanced, and at more time the interim having weighed in, let us speak our free hearts to each other. So look, he already plans to talk to Banquo and focus more on the prophecies and so on and so forth. So he says that let us meet whenever we have time and let us talk. Now once again we have an echo of the witches. When shall we three meet again, in thunder, lightning, or in rain? So this is a very veiled reference to Act 1, Scene 1. Shakespeare keeps referring back to that scene. And Banquo says, very gladly, till then enough, come friends. So they decide that they shall meet, and now he says that till then enough, come friends. So let us go and meet the king. So this is Act 1, Scene 3 for you. And in the next lectures, we shall continue from Act 1, Scene 4. So thank you everyone. I would love to hear some suggestions, some opinions from you. So feel free to comment on the comment section. Thank you.